Welcome back to another Patreon episode, and in this episode I want to take something that's really simple to do in Construct, in this case a platform that moves up and down, and I want to over-engineer it. So let's get started. So this platform here, this has been created using the sign behavior. It's very easy to put together and uses no actions or events, but you can see it's not great. It's very hard for me to get on and off the top of the platform without a jump, and it's a little bit boring. So how can we make this better? So my first idea to make this better is the lift only moves up and down when I'm standing on it. So if I stand on it, it will take me to floor 1. If I stand back on it when it's on floor 1, it will take me to floor 0. So let's get started with that first change. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to remove the sign behavior. I think the sign behavior is not actually great for our needs. I'm instead going to use one of my favorite behaviors, which is the tween behavior. Just gives that a little bit of extra control. Now I also need to keep track of which floor we're on, so I'm just going to add an instance variable. I'm going to call it floor, and I'm going to set the number to 0. So that's it for our first step. We can now jump into our event sheet. So if you're curious on how much prep I've done before this, I'm going to try and prep each scenario before I go through it in the video. So I'm literally just doing it 5 or 10 minutes beforehand. Sometimes I might even show you my process of going through this. So first thing I'm going to do is add a new event. I'm just going to check if player is overlapping at an offset, and I'm going to check the lift. I'm just going to set the offset to be 5, so not a huge amount there. Then what I'm also going to do is just add another condition, and I'm going to do this trigger once while true. This means in order for the code to trigger again, I need to actually step off the elevator completely and step back on it. So that awkward issue where I couldn't get off quick enough when I got to the top floor, that doesn't matter anymore now, because it will stop at the top floor, wait for me to get off, and then once I step back on it again, it will take me back to the bottom layer. Next, I'm going to add in a blank sub event, and I'm going to do a check to see which floor I'm on. So I'm going to do lift and compare instance variables and check if the floor is equal to 0. And I'm going to add my action first, and I'll check the floor is equals 1, because I can then copy and paste more code in one go. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to get the lift, and I want it to tween. Now before I get it to tween on the Y, I need to actually work out where I want it to stop. So I'm just going to take the lift and start by moving it to floor 1. I'm using the up arrow just to give me a bit more control on this, and around about there I think is perfect. So if I check that 1716, I'm going to go down up 1 pixel, there we go, 1750, much rounder number to remember, and just go to my lift, scroll down, and again tween one property on the y-axis, and we'll end at 1715. Time wise, we'll go 2 seconds. I don't want this to be a fast elevator, but I also don't want it to take forever. And most important thing is I do need to change the floor number now, so I'm just going to do lift set value. I'm going to change the floor number from 0 to 1. Now it should just be a case of copy and paste. One thing that you do need to be careful of is you don't want this to both trigger at the same time, because even though we're going to change this to floor number 1, what happens is we run the code for floor 0, changes to floor 1, it's going to automatically run the code for floor 1, and the lift just won't move. So you can fix this really quickly by just adding a else statement. So we can take that and add it on top, and that will do one or the other. So just a bit of changing code now, changing this to 0, and again we just need to work out the new Y property for our lift. So again I'm just going to move this all the way down till it's roughly in a position I'm happy with, and then we should be able to do a test. So move it below, and 1960, perfect. And I'm actually going to just give me a little bit more offset to play around with. Let's go 20. Okay, let's do a test. So now when I walk over to the lift, it should start moving up. Excellent. And if I step off and step back on, it should move back down. Really, really simple concept, but again, might be a little bit more useful for a certain scenario. So this is our first lift done. However, there's still room to make this better. For example, if I fall off, I now can't get back. I am now completely stuck from getting to the other floors. So let's move on to concept number 2. So my next thing that I want to do to over-engineer this problem is to add a button. So not only can you step on the lift, but you can actually call the lift from any other floor as well. So first we need is to design a button. So now I've got my 2 green buttons in, and what I want to be able to do is walk over to these and press them, and that will call the elevator to the floor that I'm currently on. So these buttons are probably going to need to have an instance variable as well. So let's give them floor 0 and floor 1. And then what we should probably look at doing is adding in the keyboard object as well. So that's it for what we need instance variable and object wise. Let's tackle the code for this. I'm going to try and do this one on the fly before doing a pause first. So at the moment we've got it where if we're overlapping the lift at the offsets, we trigger once. What we should be able to do is actually use a lot of this code again. So we'll do a check if player is overlapping another object and it is button. We're then going to add another check and say, have we pressed the keyboard button? And let's go for E. And then we're going to take this code completely and just put it underneath, just as before. And I want to just replace the lift with our button. So take the button floor instead. So if you press button floor 0, we don't actually want to go to floor 1, we want to go to floor 0. So just need to swap these 2 bits of code around. So I'm just going to take these 2 up and these 2 down. And fingers crossed, that should be working code. Let's give it a shot. So I'm going to walk over and get the lift just as normal. And now I'm going to drop down and then walk over to our button and press E and it comes down. I'm probably going to make the button hitbox a little bit bigger because it's a little bit small at the moment. And if I press it again, interesting. So it looks like it's calling it down, but not the other way. So that one works and it'll call it down, but for some reason if I press this one, it also goes down. And if you're shouting at me saying that I've not changed the instance variable, you are correct. Let's change that to a 1 and that should fix that problem. I'm also just going to edit the button itself. I'm going to resize it and align center. So let's make it 500 by 500 and then just give it the bigger hitbox. So if we just set that to bounding box, that'll give us a little bit more room to work with as well on the hitbox. So there we go, there's our new hitbox, a little bit more generous for us to actually hit. And there we go, that is our 2nd edition added. So where do we go from here? So that's our 2nd edition added, but I actually want to make some improvements before we go to our 3rd change. I want to try and streamline some of this code. So my first idea to make this happen is I've just actually extended the bottom of the button and I want to actually add in a new image point, and I'm going to put it just slightly below the button. And instead of calling the lift to a certain coordinate each time, thank you Construct for that warning, what I want to do is actually bring it to that image point. And that means when we press the button, we can actually bring it to a set amount each time. So we've got this code here, floor 0, floor 1. What I'm actually going to do is delete one of them. And instead, I'm going to tween to button.imagePoint Y and that first image point that I set up over 2 seconds. And it's going to set into floor 0. I'm going to take the button's floor number instead. And this should save us just 1 line of code, but it now means that if we add future floors, that should fix it as well. We can also take both of these now and put them up here, so we don't even need this bit of code, saving us 2 bits of code, which I think is quite a good result. And let's do a quick test. So I've got the elevator at the top now. If I press the button, it comes down to this floor. I should be able to jump on again. There we go, and we're going back up. And if I press this button, it should remain at this level. You can see it's not quite sure what to do, and it's just about there. Now, obviously I need to play around the image point because I think it's a little bit too low at the moment, but it kind of does the job. Our elevator is a little bit janky if we're already on it, so maybe a check to see if the tween behavior is already playing and letting it finish would be quite a nice addition. And there we go, that's what I've just added there as well. So just to check the tween's playing already. If it is playing, it's going to finish first before we trigger any of this extra code. Good. So where do we go from here? Well, the next thing I want to add is actually a third floor. Now, before I start getting the buttons to work with these new floors, and our buttons might work, but obviously stepping on the elevator won't work anymore, what I actually want to do first is create a loop to create these floors for me so I can have an infinite number of floors. And the reason I want to do that is if these floors are not perfectly spaced apart, I think we're going to have lots of issues with our code and lots of problems that we have to try and tackle. So getting them perfectly spaced would be really good. And the easiest way to do that is to introduce a loop. So I'm going to work on the loop now because I think it's going to be a little bit technical and I'm going to make lots of mistakes on it. And I'll come back once that's working. So I've just unpaused the video. I've not finished the loop yet, but I want to show you the next part of the loop. I've done the really boring bit. All I've done is literally do a create object for every single object that's on the ground floor already. And for the X value, I've just put in the exact X value. For the Y value, I've actually used this start Y value. This is where the actual floor starts at that 1950. And then I've just calculated where the other ones are in relation to that. So the doors are 50 pixels higher than that. And the text is 75 higher than that. I'm also repeating for 3 times, and then I'm minusing 1 from that because I don't care for the first floor because I've already done that. So that's that 0 floor. So I actually want to do the other floors on top of that. So a couple of changes need to be made. First of all, for every single of these Y coordinates, I need to actually subtract a certain amount because we're going upwards, so we're subtracting from that. Now I could just put in an arbitrary number at this point. So I could say start Y minus 50 and then minus 100. And that'll work. However, I want to be smart about this. So what I'm going to do instead is I'm going to create another local variable. And I'm going to call it gap. And I'm going to set the gap. I have no idea how big the gap needs to be. I'll go 200. And this means once I've done all these objects, I can actually just change this one variable to change it for all of them. So what I can do now is I can minus gap. Now this will work for the first floor, but it won't work for the other floors on top. So all I need to do is go into brackets and times this by the loop index. The loop index will tell me how many times I've gone through the loop. So this will start at 0 and then it will go up 1 each time. I actually want to add 1 to the loop to begin with. And for BODMAS's sake, I'm going to just bracket this twice just to be safe. So now the gap will start at 200. Then 400, 600, 800 for each time we're looping through, and that should give us our different floors. So now I've got to do the boring bit, which is copy and paste this code for every single object. So that should be it now. Before I actually test this, there's 2 objects that I need to change. The button and the floor number. So the floor number I want to set the text for, the button I actually want to set the instance variable on what floor it is. So for this, I'm just going to go to button, scroll down to set value, and the floor is going to be the loop index. Again, we don't care about floor 0, so I'm just going to add 1 to that. The first button I've already put in, I've obviously set the default value to 0, so that one doesn't matter. So I'll put that with that one there, and for the text, I'm going to do the same thing again. So I'm just going to scroll down, set text, and this is going to be the loop index plus 1. So let's do a test. So you can see that we've got our different floors. Some of the things I've not thought about is I do want that gap in the middle. So I'm going to have a little bit of a rethink on how to set that up. And in terms of the gap, I think I'm happy with the gap. However, my buttons are floating, so I'm just going to bring those down a little bit further. So I'm going to tweak these and then get back to you. So I've realized that I've been paused for a little while, so I don't know when I actually last got back to you. But what I've done to fix the platform issue, I've created 2 different platforms and just set the width to 355 and changed the X on the second one. And what I've also done is add this on start of layout. This means that the loop doesn't go on infinitely. If you don't have the on start of layout, it just keeps creating objects over and over again and it gets very, very laggy. So now we can change the floor count to any number we want. So in this case, I've got 10 different floors, and if I run it, we have 10 different floors, 0 to 9. The only issue that we've got now is our lift actually doesn't take us anywhere past floor 1 or floor 2. So this definitely does need fixing. It looks like some of our other code might have broken as I've made some changes. So how do we go from floor 1 all the way to floor 10? Well, I need to have a think and get back to you on this one because I haven't actually got a clue on how I want to tackle this problem just yet. So the idea that I've come up with is when you go over to a button, so the player goes over to a button, we'll have a little interface that appears, and this will have buttons for all the different floors, so 0 to how many. So I've tried implementing this already, and what I've got so far is using the loop counter, create a button, adding to the x-axis each time, and then setting the text to the loop index. And what this looks like is something like this. However, as you can see, it's not the best because we're going over the size of the interface. I don't want to make this interface super long either. So let's make some changes so we actually put this on some different rows instead of just one long row. Thought I'd just show this, thought it was quite funny. Obviously not quite the desired solution, but there we go. That's what happens when we mess about with loops. Let's see if we can get it closer to what we're after. So a little bit more playing around, and this is what we've got. So this is being automatically generated. So if you change the number of floors, you'll change the number of buttons that are available, and obviously we need to add functions to these buttons. But let's have a quick look at the code and how this works. So all of this is being done inside the loop, and what we've got is we've got this thing called the column number, and we've got the row size. So first thing we want to do is just get rid of the word row size for a second and just change it to a default value being 3, and in this case this one's going to change to 2. So what we're saying is the current loop index, so this is how many times the loop has repeated, it's going to start from 0. We're going to minus the column and times it by 3. So to begin with, the column starts at 0, so 0 times 3 is 0, minus it from the loop index, we also get 0, loop index then goes to 1, and then eventually 2. Once it reaches 2, we're going to add 1 to the column. So now when you do our new calculation, we've got the loop index being 3, but we are minusing 1 times 3, so that brings it back to 0. So we're going to wait until that gets to 2 again before we add 1 to the column. So that's our first bit there. Let's put those numbers back to what they were before. And then when it comes to creating the button, this looks really complex, but we're kind of just doing what we did with the different floors. So we'll start with the Y, we're just doing the column times the height of the button. For the X, it's slightly more complicated. It's just kind of just what we're doing before. We have to actually look at the current loop index and then take away a set value from it to bring it back to 0, 1, 2, and then next row 0, 1, 2, next row. So a little bit complex, but again, something I've had a bit of practice with when I did my sort of card game RPG, which you've seen on the Patreon channel before as well. But now we've got our buttons in place, and again we can adjust this to be any size we want now, which is really great. So let's add a little bit of function to these now. I'm also going to just tidy up the way this looks and play around with that, and I'll get back to you very shortly. So it's been roughly about 20-30 minutes since I last recorded, and this is currently where we're up to. I've been messing around with a bit of CSS code, and we've now got our buttons in place, and we need to actually program these now. So there's two things that we need to consider when fixing this problem. The first one is, how do we call the elevators not already here? I can press the button, but I want to go to floor 6. I'm on floor 0. Is the elevator going to come to me first? So what I think we need is we actually need this UI to only come up when we're on the elevator, and if we press the button, the elevator then comes to us. So let's actually work on this code together. So first thing I'm going to do is actually scrap our first bit of code we ever had. That can disappear now. We now want to say, if we press E on the keyboard, we're overlapping the button and tween's not playing. We then still want to go to the image point 1 of the current button we're overlapping. That's fine, and we can set the floor to the button floor. That all still works. That's great. We now need to do a check if we're overlapping the bottom of the elevator. So we're going to say if player is overlapping at offset. We'll do the same before. I think we had it set to 10, so this would be for the lift. Then what we want to do is take our button to options. We want to actually set its location. So set position, and we want to set it to player.x and then player.y, and we don't want it to be exactly on top of us, so let's do -100, so it's above us. We're also going to make this visible. So we're going to set visible to true. And We're also going to do the same for the buttons. We'll set those to visible as well. Now, while we're there, we should probably do the inverse of this. So I'm just going to take the exact code, copy and paste it, and then just invert this. We no longer need to set the position. We'll just make it invisible instead. Next, we'll program the buttons to actually work. So what we'll do is floor number button, on clicked. We're then going to add another condition, and we're going to use this pick by condition. This allows us to pick an object that meets a certain condition. So we want to pick an actual button where the floor number button, if that's what I've called it, there we go, the ones that we actually click on, dot text, is the same as button dot and then floor. If those two things match, then we're just going to take the code that we did before, where we tween, and we're just going to make it go to that particular floor. Let's do a test. I'm not sure how well this is going to work, but let's find out. So first of all, our little UI's gone. That's good. I'm then going to step on the lift, and we can see that we've got these new numbers appear, and I want to go to floor 6. And the buttons don't work. Okay, let me come back to you very shortly and hopefully have a fix for you. Okay, problem solved. So we actually just need to cast the button.text to an integer. Casting to data types is a little bit strange in construct. It doesn't really follow the normal rules of programming. A lot of the time you don't need to cast. However, some cases like this, it apparently wants you to cast. So we'll cast to an integer, so they're both the same. And if we run it, it now does work. However, there are some issues we can still fix. So if I walk over and I say I want to go to floor number 1, so we can do a test now. I'm not sure when I actually last paused this because I've realized that I've been pausing a little while again. But now if we click on the elevator, we can press a floor number. So we'll go to floor 6 this time. And you'll see the elevator is moving at a standard speed all the way through. If for any reason I jump off the elevator and make my way down, let's say to floor number 1, if I was to press the button, the elevator will slowly make its way back down to me at the exact same rate, and then I'll be able to jump on board. So what we've got at the moment is we've got quite a nice system in place, and it feels like there's not too much more we can do, but there is a big feature that I do want to add. Let's say that the elevator is currently moving from floor 7 all the way down to floor 0. And I'm at floor 2 and I call the lift. I want the lift to stop on floor 2 for a short amount of time and then make its way to floor 0. So a couple of challenges there to put in place. Let's see what we can do. Okay, it's been around about 2 hours, but I've got something really impressive to show you. So you can see at the moment the lift is going down and it's stopping at a number of floors. Now I've actually set these floors up before I've ran the program, so I've got a list going. However, I can add to the list as well. So what I've done is I've actually put the number keyboard to the different buttons so I can get around much quicker. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to press a load of elevator buttons. So I'm going to press floor 4, 7, 9, 2, 5 and 1. And what it's going to do is it's going to go through that list that I've put in place. You see the list in the top left, it's a little bit small, and it's going to try and visit all those floors. I'm going to go to floor 4 as well. Once it's visited all those floors, it's then going to make its way down the way and repeat those floors again, and then it's going to make its way up the way. So I'm going to stopping at floor 8 as well now, so go all the way down to floor number 1. And once it's done floor number 1, it will see that it doesn't need to go to floor 0, so it will start working its way back up to floor number 8. If I quickly stop at floor 6, it will stop at floor 6 first, just like you would expect a real elevator to work. So again, this took a little bit of time to implement. I'll show you the rough code for it. I'm not going to go into too much detail because it's starting to get a little bit complicated. But we've now got something that operates like a real elevator, which is really, really exciting. And again, if I just go to like floor 0 now, and this does work on top of our other system that we added where we can actually just press a button to a floor. So again, if it thinks the elevator is already moving downwards and you say you want to move upwards, it'll finish going down first and then it'll go back up. just like a real lift works. So again, we could go, if we really wanted to, onto here and press our buttons as normal. I do need to fix the buttons because I've realized they've stretched out a little bit on, I think as I've stretched the viewport size. But again, this will still work as normal. We can still use these buttons to get to the different floors. So code wise, first of all, I've deleted or just hidden for now the code that we had before. I'm actually going to delete it now. And when you press the button, it pushes it onto an array. And then what we've got a bit further down is a bit of a check. So it just starts here. And what it says, if the array is not empty, and the lift's not moving, and the tween's not playing, and you're going in the up direction, do this bit of code here. Now, the way we check for up and down, I'm sort of scrolling back and forth through code, so I do apologise, is if the direction's set to none. This only happens if the array is empty, which it will do at the start of the layout. If the button's greater, or the button's floor number is greater than where the lift currently is, set direction to up. If not, set direction to down. So it's just doing a check going, have you pressed a button that is higher up than the elevator? You want to go upwards. Go back to this code then. We're going to repeat. Now this repeats for the floor count minus the lift floor. So let's say there's 10 floors in this scenario, because there are, and the lift's at floor 4. It will repeat 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So it's going to repeat one above and keep going up. We do the opposite for going down the way. So again, if you're on lift 6, then it'll repeat for 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. So it goes through all those different floors. If it sees that lift number in the index, what it's going to do is, first of all, it's going to find the right button that we need. It's going to tween to that floor number. And again, it's going to start moving. It's then going to delete all instances of that floor array, and then we stop the loop as well so it doesn't take up any more processing power. If we get to the end of that loop check and it doesn't contain any of those values, so let's say we're on floor 7 and no one's pressed the button for floor 8 or 9, we set the direction for down and we do the same check going down the way. And we keep doing that until the array is empty. As soon as the array is empty, we can set the direction to none. Anytime that we call it, we set moving to true. Once it arrives at its location, so tween finishes, we wait 2 seconds so the lift stays in place, and then we set moving to false so it can start again. And then we just got a bit of code to delete the floor array and to also show the text you saw on the top left. So overall, pretty complex solution to our sign behavior. And I could stop there, but I've got one more really daft idea that I want to implement before I get this completely squared away and I send you this code and upload this Patreon episode. And I want to put in NPCs to use this lift system for me, so I don't need to go and press the buttons myself. So these will spawn on random floors, they'll go to another random floor, and it will keep track of all the lift motions. So they'll wait next to the button. Once the lift arrives, they'll jump on the lift and then they'll go to their floor and then they'll disappear off screen. This is a really silly idea. Let's see how long it takes to implement this one. So it's been around about 2 hours since I last recorded, and this is the working NPCs. It's a little bit buggy and there are some issues, but I'm not going to spend absolutely ages trying to fix every single bug because this is not being used as part of a game or part of a tutorial. It's just a bit of a mess about, a proof of concept of how far we could take something as daft as an elevator. But you can see that they will go to the button, they'll wait there, they'll call which floor they're on, so it will go to that floor, and then when it arrives at the floor they want to go to, they'll then get off the elevator, and then I've made it so when they get past the number they just disappear. So I think it's pretty cool, it's quite fun to watch, like I say, bugs aside, and I think it's a really interesting sort of concept that you could do. So I'll leave the code in the description if you want to mess about, if you want to fix the bugs, then go ahead, but let me know what I should over-engineer next time, and if you like this sort of concept of me just taking something really daft and simple, something that takes 2 seconds to do normally, and then just go ridiculously over the top with it. But that's it for today. Thank you for all the support on Patreon. It's been absolutely fantastic, and I'll see you in the next video.